The silent scream. The night was heavy with the kind of silence that made your skin crawl. It wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that came before a storm. In a small, dimly lit room in Lagos, Nigeria, a woman sat on the edge of a rickety bed, her hands trembling as she clutched a faded photograph of her 2 children. Her name was Amina, and she was trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Amina's husband, Tunde, was a man of contradictions. To the outside world, he was a respected businessman, a church deacon, and a pillar of the community. But behind closed doors, he was a monster. His fists were his words, and his anger was a fire that burned everything in its path. Amina had endured years of his abuse, but tonight felt different. The air was thick with tension, and the look in Tunde's eyes was one she had never seen before. "You think you can leave me?" Tunde's voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 screams. He stood in the doorway, his broad frame blocking her only exit. "You think you can take my children away from me?" Amina's heart pounded in her chest. She had thought about leaving him so many times, but fear always held her back. Fear of what he would do to her. Fear of what he would do to their children. Fear of losing them forever. In Nigeria, the courts often favored fathers in custody battles, especially when the mother had no money or family to support her. Amina had neither. I wasn't going to leave," she stammered, her voice barely audible. I just want the children to be safe." Tunde laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Safe? You think they're not safe with me? I'm their father." He took a step closer, and Amina instinctively pulled her legs up onto the bed, as if the thin mattress could somehow protect her. She glanced at the photograph in her hands. Her children, Kemi and Chidi, smiling up at her with innocent eyes. They were her reason for living, her reason for enduring the pain. "Give me that," Tunde growled, snatching the photograph from her hands. He stared at it for a moment, his face twisting in anger. "You think you're a better parent than me? You're nothing without me. Nothing." He tore the photograph in half, the sound of ripping paper echoing in the small room. Amina's heart broke as she watched the pieces fall to the floor. It felt like he had torn her soul in two. "Please, Tunde," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Don't do this. Think about the children. They need us both." But Tunde wasn't listening. His eyes were wild, his breathing heavy. He grabbed her by the arm, his grip so tight it felt like her bones were being crushed. "You're not going anywhere," he snarled, dragging her off the bed. "You're mine. You'll always be mine." Amina struggled, but she was no match for his strength. He threw her to the ground, and she landed hard, the impact knocking the air out of her lungs. She tried to crawl away, but he was on her in an instant, his fists raining down on her like a storm. The pain was unbearable, but it wasn't the physical blows that hurt the most. It was the knowledge that her children were in the next room, listening to their mother's screams. She wanted to cry out for help, but she couldn't. She didn't want them to see her like this. She didn't want them to remember her as a victim. As the blows continued, Amina's mind drifted to happier times. She remembered the day Kemi was born, how tiny and perfect she had been. She remembered Chidi's first steps, how he had stumbled into her arms with a toothless grin. She remembered the dreams she had for them, dreams of a better life, a life free from fear and pain. But those dreams were slipping away, fading into the darkness. Amina's vision blurred, and the room began to spin. She could feel herself slipping away, but she fought to hold on. She had to survive. For her children. Just as she was about to lose consciousness, the door burst open, and a small voice cried out, "Mummy!" It was Kemi. She stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. Chidi was behind her, clutching his sister's hand. Tunde froze, his fist hovering in midair. For a moment, the room was silent, the only sound a ragged breathing of the four people trapped in this nightmare. "Daddy, stop!" Kemi pleaded, her voice trembling. "Please, don't hurt Mummy." Tunde stared at his daughter, his face a mass of confusion and rage. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he turned back to Amina, his eyes filled with a hatred so deep it made her blood run cold. "This is your fault," he whispered, his voice shaking with anger. "You turned them against me." Amina tried to speak, to tell him he was wrong, but the words wouldn't come. Her body was broken, her spirit shattered. All she could do was look at her children, her beautiful, innocent children, and pray that they would be okay. Tunde stood up, his chest heaving. He looked at Amina one last time, then turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The sound of the door closing echoed in Amina's ears, but she barely registered it. Her vision was fading, and the pain was becoming too much to bear. She reached out for her children, but her arms felt like lead. "Mummy, don't leave us," Kemi sobbed, kneeling beside her. "Please, don't leave us." Amina wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that she would never leave them, but she couldn't. The darkness was closing in, and she could feel herself slipping away. As her eyes fluttered shut, she heard Chidi's voice, soft and scared. "Mummy, wake up. Please, wake up." But Amina couldn't. She was already gone. The room was silent. The only sound the soft sobs of two children who had just lost their mother. Outside, the storm finally broke, the rain pounding against the windows like the tears of a grieving world. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The rain fell hard, pounding on the roof like a drum. Inside the small house, Kemi and Chidi sat on the floor, their small bodies trembling. Their mother, Amina, lay still on the ground, her face bruised and swollen. The room was quiet except for the sound of their crying. Kemi, the older of the two, wiped her tears with the back of her hand. She was only 8 years old, but in that moment, she felt much older. She looked at her little brother, Chidi, who was just 5. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide with fear. "Mummy is sleeping, right?" Chidi asked, his voice shaking. Kemi didn't know what to say. She didn't want to believe that their mother was gone. She reached out and touched Amina's hand. It was cold. "Mummy, wake up," Kemi whispered, shaking her mother gently. "Please, wake up." But Amina didn't move. Her eyes remained closed and her body lay still. Kemi's heart sank. She didn't want to believe it, but deep down, she knew. Their mother was gone. Chidi started to cry louder. "I want Mummy. I want Mummy." Kemi pulled her brother close, hugging him tightly. She didn't know what to do. She was just a child herself, but she knew she had to be strong for Chidi. "Keep quiet, it's okay," Kemi said, trying to sound brave. "We'll be okay." But she didn't believe her own words. How could they be okay without their mother? Who would take care of them now? The door creaked open, and Tunde walked back into the room. His face was hard, and his eyes were cold. He looked at Amina's lifeless body on the floor, then at his children. "Get up," he said, his voice harsh. "Stop crying." Kemi and Chidi froze. They were afraid of their father, especially after what he had just done. Kemi held Chidi tighter, as if trying to protect him. "Daddy, what happened to Mummy?" Kemi asked, her voice trembling. Tunde didn't answer. Instead, he walked over to Amina's body and stared down at her. For a moment, his face softened, and Kemi thought she saw a flicker of sadness in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it came. "She's gone," Tunde said coldly, "and it's her own fault." Kemi's heart broke. She wanted to scream, to cry, to ask her father why he had done this. But she was too scared. She knew what he was capable of. Tunde turned to his children, his expression hard. "Listen to me. You will not tell anyone what happened here tonight. Do you understand? If anyone asks, your mother left us. She ran away." Kemi and Chidi nodded, too scared to argue. "Good," Tunde said. "Now go to your room. I'll deal with this." Kemi took Chidi's hand and led him to their small bedroom. They climbed into their shared bed, holding each other tightly. The room was dark, and the only sound was the rain outside. "Kemi, I'm scared," Chidi whispered. "Me too," Kemi admitted. "But we have to be brave. For Mummy." Chidi nodded, but he was still crying. Kemi wiped his tears and held him close. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. She would do whatever it took to protect her brother. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. Tunde had left early, saying he had business to take care of. Kemi and Chidi sat at the small kitchen table, picking at the food their father had left for them. Neither of them had an appetite. Kemi, what's going to happen to us? Chidi asked, his voice small. Kemi didn't know how to answer. She had no idea what their future held. All she knew was that they couldn't stay here, not with their father. We'll figure it out, Kemi said, trying to sound confident. We'll find a way. But deep down, she was terrified. She was just a child, and she had no one to turn to. Their mother was gone, and their father was a monster. As the days passed, life in the house became even harder. Tun was angrier than ever, and he took his rage out on Kemi and Chidi. He would yell at them for the smallest things, and sometimes he would hit them. Kemi tried her best to shield Chidi from their father's anger. She would take the blame for things she didn't do, just to protect her brother. But it was getting harder and harder to keep him safe. One night, after Tunde had gone to bed, Kemi and Chidi sat in their room, whispering to each other. Kemi, I can't take it anymore, Chidi said, tears streaming down his face. I miss Mummy. I want to leave. Kemi nodded. She felt the same way. She had been thinking about running away for days, but she didn't know where they would go. We'll leave, Kemi said, her voice firm, but we have to be careful. We can't let Daddy find us. Chidi's eyes widened. Where will we go? Kemi thought for a moment. She remembered a woman in their village who had always been kind to them. Her name was Mama Nkechi, and she ran a small shop in the market. Maybe she would help them. We'll go to Mama Nkechi, Kemi said. She'll help us. Chidi nodded, his eyes filled with hope. The next morning, while Tun was out, Kemi and Chidi packed a small bag with their clothes and a few belongings. They didn't have much, but it was enough to get them started. Ready? Kemi asked, holding out her hand. Chidi took it and nodded. Ready. They slipped out of the house and into the busy streets of Lagos. The sun was hot, and the air was filled with the sounds of cars honking and people talking. Kemi held Chidi's hand tightly, guiding him through the crowd. They walked for what felt like hours, their small legs aching with every step. Finally, they reached Mama Nkechi's shop. Mama Nkechi was a kind, older woman with a warm smile. When she saw Kemi and Chidi, her smile faded and her eyes filled with concern. Kemi? Chidi? What are you doing here? She asked, kneeling down to their level. Kemi's eyes filled with tears. Mom and Nkechi, we need help. Our father, he hurt Mummy, and now he's hurting us. Mama Nkechi's face turned serious. She looked around to make sure no one was watching, then pulled the children into her shop. Come inside, she said. You're safe here. Kemi and Chidi followed her into the small shop, their hearts pounding. They didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, they felt a glimmer of hope. Mama Nkechi's shop was small but cozy. The shelves were filled with colorful fabrics, beads, and handmade crafts. The smell of incense filled the air, and the sound of soft music played in the background. It was a stark contrast to the cold, tense atmosphere of the home Kemi and Chidi had just left. Mama Nkechi led the children to a small room at the back of the shop. She gestured for them to sit on a worn but comfortable couch. Kemi and Chidi sat down, their small bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. Tell me everything, Mama Nkechi said gently, her voice filled with concern. What happened to your mother? Why are you here? Kemi took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She looked at Chidi, who was clutching her hand tightly, then back at Mama Nkechi. Our father, he hurt Mummy, Kemi began, her voice shaking. He beat her, and then she didn't wake up. Tears streamed down Kemi's face as she spoke. Chidi buried his face in her side, his small body shaking with sobs. Mama Nkechi's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and pulled the children into a tight hug. Oh, my dear children, I'm so sorry. So sorry. For a moment, they just sat there, holding each other. Kemi felt a small sense of relief. For the first time in days, she felt like someone cared about them. We couldn't stay there, Kemi continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Our father, he's angry all the time. He hits us too. We had to leave. Mama Nkechi nodded, her face serious. You did the right thing, coming here. You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you. Kemi felt a glimmer of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by fear. What if he finds us? What if he comes looking for us? Mama and Nkechi's expression hardened. He won't find you here. And even if he does, he'll have to deal with me. I won't let him hurt you. Kemi and Chidi looked at her, their eyes wide with gratitude. They didn't know what to say. Now, Mama and Nkechi said, standing up, you must be hungry. Let me get you something to eat. She left the room and returned a few minutes later with a plate of food, fried plantains, beans, and a small piece of fish. Kemi and Chidi's eyes lit up. They hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Thank you, Mom and Nkechi, Kemi said, her voice filled with gratitude. Eat, Mom and Nkechi said with a smile. You need your strength. The children ate quickly, savoring every bite. For the first time in what felt like forever, they felt a small sense of comfort. Over the next few days, Mama and Nkechi took care of Kemi and Chidi, as if they were her own. She gave them clean clothes to wear, made sure they had enough to eat, and even let them help out in the shop. But despite the kindness, Kemi couldn't shake the feeling of fear. She kept looking over her shoulder, expecting to see her father at any moment. She knew he wouldn't just let them go. One evening, as the sun was setting, Mom and Nkechi sat down with the children in the small room at the back of the shop. Kemi, Chidi, she said, her voice gentle but serious. We need to talk about what happens next. You can't stay here forever. It's not safe. Kemi's heart sank. She had been afraid of this. Where will we go? Mama and Nkechi sighed. I've been thinking about that. I have a sister who lives in a village far from here. She's a good woman, and she has a big heart. I think she'll take you in. Kemi and Chidi exchanged worried glances. The thought of leaving Mom and Nkechi was scary, but they knew they didn't have many options. Will we be safe there? Chidi asked, his voice small. Mama and Nkechi nodded. Yes, my dear, you'll be safe there, and I'll make sure your father doesn't find you. Kemi took a deep breath. When will we go? Tomorrow, Mama and Nkechi said. I've already arranged for a driver to take you. It's a long journey, but it's the best way to keep you safe. Kemi nodded, trying to be brave. She looked at Chidi, who was clutching her hand tightly. We'll be okay, Kemi said, more to herself than to anyone else. We have to be. The next morning, Mama and Nkechi woke the children early. She gave them each a small bag with clothes and food for the journey. Remember, she said, kneeling down to their level. No matter what happens, you are strong. You are brave, and you are loved. Kemi and Chidi hugged her tightly, tears streaming down their faces. Thank you, Mom and Nkechi, Kemi said, her voice filled with emotion. We'll never forget you. Mama and Nkechi smiled, though her eyes were filled with tears. Go now. Be safe. The children climbed into the car, their hearts heavy with fear and uncertainty. As the car pulled away, Kemi looked out the window, watching as Mama and Nkechi grew smaller and smaller in the distance. Kemi, Chidi whispered, clutching her hand. What's going to happen to us? Kemi took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I don't know, Chidi, but we'll face it together. No matter what. The car sped down the dusty road, taking them further and further away from the life they had known. Kemi didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She would do whatever it took to protect her brother. The journey to the village was long and exhausting. The car bumped along the uneven roads, and the heat made the air feel heavy. Kemi and Chidi sat in the back seat, their small bodies pressed together for comfort. They didn't speak much, each lost in their own thoughts. Kemi stared out the window, watching the landscape change from the busy streets of Lagos to the quiet, open fields of the countryside. She wondered what their new life would be like. Would Mama and Nkechi's sister be as kind as Mama and Nkechi? Would they finally be safe? Chidi, on the other hand, was nervous. He had never been this far from home before, and the uncertainty of it all made his stomach churn. He clung to Kemi's hand, his small fingers trembling. Kemi, he whispered after a while, do you think we'll ever see Daddy again? Kemi's heart ached at the question. She didn't know how to answer. Part of her hoped they would never see their father again, but another part of her wondered if he would come looking for them. I don't know, Chidi, she said softly, but if he does, we'll be ready. We'll protect each other. Chidi nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. After what felt like hours, the car finally pulled into a small village. The houses were simple, made of mud and thatch, and the streets were quiet. The driver stopped in front of a small compound and gestured for the children to get out. "This is it," he said. "Mama and Nkechi's sister lives here." Kemi and Chidi climbed out of the car, their legs stiff from the long ride. They stood in front of the compound, their hearts pounding. A woman stepped out of the house, her face kind and welcoming. She looked a lot like Mama Nkechi, with the same warm smile and gentle eyes. "You must be Kemi and Chidi," she said, walking over to them. "I'm Auntie Grace. Mama Nkechi told me all about you." Kemi and Chidi nodded, too nervous to speak. Auntie Grace knelt down to their level, her smile softening. "You're safe here. This is your home now." Her words brought a sense of relief to the children. For the first time in what felt like forever, they felt a glimmer of hope. Over the next few weeks, Kemi and Chidi settled into their new life. Auntie Grace was as kind as Mama Nkechi had promised. She made sure they had enough to eat, gave them a warm place to sleep, and even enrolled them in the local school. But despite the kindness, Kemi couldn't shake the memories of what had happened. She would often wake up in the middle of the night, her heart racing, thinking she heard her father's voice. One night, after a particularly bad dream, Kemi sat outside on the steps of the house, staring up at the stars. Auntie Grace found her there and sat down beside her. "Can't sleep?" Auntie Grace asked gently. Kemi shook her head. "I keep thinking about everything." Auntie Grace nodded, her expression understanding. "It's hard to forget, isn't it?" Kemi looked down at her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't understand why he did it. Why he hurt Mummy. Why he hurt us." Auntie Grace sighed, her eyes filled with sadness. "Sometimes people do terrible things because they're broken inside. It doesn't make it right, but it's the truth. Your father, he was a troubled man. But that doesn't mean you have to carry his pain." Kemi looked up at her, tears in her eyes. "But what if I'm like him? What if I become like him?" Auntie Grace shook her head firmly. "No, Kemi, you are not like him. You are kind and brave and strong. You have your mother's heart, and that's what matters." Her words brought a sense of comfort to Kemi. She realized that she didn't have to be defined by her father's actions. She could choose to be different. As the months passed, Kemi and Chidi began to heal. They made friends at school, and Auntie Grace became like a second mother to them. They still missed their mother terribly, but they found solace in the love and support of their new family. One day, as they sat outside under the shade of a mango tree, Chidi turned to Kemi with a smile. "Kemi," he said, "do you think Mummy will be proud of us?" Kemi smiled back, her heart swelling with love for her little brother. "Yes, Chidi, I think she will be very proud." The story of Kemi and Chidi teaches us that even in the darkest of times, there is hope. It shows us the importance of courage, resilience, and the power of love. No matter how difficult life may seem, we must never lose sight of our worth or our ability to rise above our circumstances. It also reminds us that violence is never the answer. The pain and suffering caused by domestic violence can have lasting effects, not just on the victims, but on everyone around them. We must strive to create a world where love and kindness prevail, and where no one has to live in fear. Finally, the story highlights the importance of speaking out and seeking help. No one should have to endure abuse in silence. There are people who care, and there are always options, no matter how hopeless things may seem. Kemi and Chidi's journey is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. It shows us that even in the face of unimaginable pain, we can find the courage to rebuild our lives and create a better future. Thank you for joining us on this emotional and suspenseful journey through the silent scream. Kemi and Chidi's story is far from over. There are more twists, challenges, and moments of hope waiting to unfold. Watch out for part 2, where their journey continues and new revelations come to light. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with others. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life. Let's spread awareness about the impact of domestic violence and the importance of resilience, love, and hope. Stay tuned for part 2. You won't want to miss what happens next. Together, we can make a difference. See you in the next video.